At 8 a.m. on a Monday morning, Shenyang Cosmetics was bustling with energy again. Su Jin, dressed in a beige business suit and 5-centimeter heels, strolled in gracefully. Su Jia, President Wang asked you to drop by her office when you arrived. The receptionist's sweet greeting made Su Jin smile in spite of herself. She could never resist that doll-like face. Instead of heading to her workstation to drop off her bag and coat, Su Jin walked straight down the hall to the general manager's office. She gave the door a polite knock and smiled warmly as she entered. President Wang, you wanted to see me? Wang Jia turned around, sliding a hot cup of coffee in her direction with a mysterious smile. I've got some good news for you. Su Jin remained silent, her mind racing. She figured Wang Jia might bring up the extra year-end bonus she'd managed to secure for her. After all, the branch's performance this year had been outstanding. While she was preparing to express her gratitude, Wang Jia took a surprising turn. Su, congratulations. You're getting a promotion. A promotion? Su Jin was stunned, unsure if this was a pleasant surprise or a shock, and she froze in place. With a grin, Wang Jia patted her on the shoulder. That's right, you heard me. You're getting promoted. Just a few days ago, the headquarters talked to me about opening a branch in Rongcheng and asked if I had any suitable candidates to take the lead. I thought, who better than you? Besides, isn't that your hometown? Wang Jia continued with her polite words about cooperation and mutual support, completely oblivious to how Su Jin's face had stiffened. Like water freezing on a winter's day, her expression changed instantly. Su Jin thanked Wang Jia for her kind offer and quickly excused herself, promising to think it over. Su Jin had never imagined she'd one day be offered a promotion. She'd always been content with her steady performance, consistently ranking in the top 5, and her monthly earnings more than covered her household expenses. A stable life with a predictable income was all she had ever wanted. So, she strongly suspected that Wang Jia had exaggerated her capabilities to the leadership, forcing her into a position she didn't really want. Without much hesitation, Su Jin declined the offer the next day, suggesting that the valuable opportunity be given to a younger colleague. Think it over, Wang Jia urged, her tone sincere. Opportunities like this don't come often. If you don't advance now, one day, you might find yourself passed over by younger colleagues. What will you do then? She continued, even if you don't want to push yourself, remember that raising a child is expensive. Your son, Kenyang, is growing up fast. You'll need money for all sorts of things down the road. Why not give it one more shot now, while you're still young enough? Consider it as laying a foundation for your son. It seemed familiar faces always knew where to press, and with just a few words, Wang Jia had touched Su Jin's softest spot. Her little son at home was, indeed, her greatest motivation. When she divorced her ex-husband, Su Jin hadn't asked for anything but custody of their son. She left that nightmare of a household with only her half-year-old boy, Zhang Kenyang, in her arms. Now, the little guy had grown into a sweet 5-year-old, always clinging to her like a tiny, warm shadow. The little cherry mouth often left its sugary traces on her neck, echoing in her dreams. Walking along the tree-lined path at night, Su Jin replayed Wang Jia's words from earlier that day. What Wang Jia said wasn't entirely unreasonable, but aside from not wanting to leave her comfortable life, there was another reason. The painful memories associated with her hometown made her instinctively avoid it. The thought of being thrown back into that mire, trampled on by others, made her shudder. She walked aimlessly until her foot brushed against a cluster of blooming night jasmine, snapping her back to reality. Without realizing it, she had arrived at the entrance of her apartment building. Looking up at the dim yellow light spilling from the 5th-floor window, warmth filled Su Jin's heart. She tried to insert her key quietly, but before she could turn it, the door opened from the inside. Mom, why are you still up? I told you, no need to wait if I'm home late, she said. Zhao Guiying took Su Jin's coat and hung it up. She slipped into the kitchen, saying, It's late. You must be hungry. I'll make you a bowl of tomato and egg noodles. Thanks, Mom. In no time, a steaming bowl of noodles was placed in front of her. Under the soft kitchen light, the two of them fell into a casual conversation. Su-jin asked about her son first, then shared the news of her potential promotion. Zhao Guiying clapped her hands in delight, her face lighting up with a grin that made her features seem to stretch with joy. "Oh, that's wonderful news. You've worked so hard all these years. It's time they awarded you a Medal of Honor." Despite her limited education, Zhao Guiying associated promotions with old-fashioned accolades, as if only a medal could truly represent success. Seeing her mother's joy, Su-jin hesitated before voicing her concerns. "But, Mom, if I take this position, I'll have to move to Rongqing. You and Kanyang." She trailed off, unsure if her mother would be willing to leave the place she'd called home for so long. Although their bond was deep, Su-jin had a lingering awareness of boundaries. She couldn't assume to make such a decision on her mother's behalf. The only one she had the right to decide for was her son. Su-jin never expected Zhao Guiying to be so cheerful the next day, packing up their belongings to move. Just as she hadn't expected herself to so quickly agree to Wang Jia's recommendation. Don't overthink it. How do you know you're up for it if you don't take the chance? Ever since Su-jin left Wang Jia's office, these words had echoed in her mind. One afternoon before their departure, as she was packing, Su-jin asked Zhao Guiying if she wanted to say goodbye to her old friends. After all, it might be a long time before they'd be back. On the balcony, busy with her jars of pickled vegetables, Zhao Guiying answered without even looking up, "No need. I already met up with them a few days ago when Kanyang was in kindergarten. Besides, we have all this technology now we can call, and I have my QQ account. I can even video chat with them." Su-jin chuckled, thinking to herself how modern her mother-in-law had become, even keeping up with QQ. Zhao Guiying, besides taking care of Kanyang, loved tending to plants. But she never bought flowers. Pretty but useless. It's better to grow something edible. Despite being just a simple rural woman, Zhao Guiying believed that only what came from the soil and ended up on the table was worth the effort. So, she bought seeds and grew lettuce, cherry tomatoes, and peppers on the balcony, and during harvest, she'd share her little crops with the neighbors. Before long, she had a close group of friends among the aunties. They'd often invite her to join their gatherings, though Su-jin found the activities trivial. However, she respected Zhao Guiying's fondness for them and never interfered or commented. To Su-jin, Zhao Guiying's help with her son's care gave her the freedom to work, and that support was invaluable. She had no reason to meddle in how her mother-in-law spent her own time. "Mom, we're leaving the day after tomorrow. Are you all set?" Su-jin asked, feigning nonchalance. Noticing her daughter-in-law's slight hesitation, Zhao Guiying smiled knowingly. "I'm ready. Hey, don't worry about all this. I'll handle the packing. You'd better sort out our accommodations. I've heard there are tons of good spots to eat and fun things to do. All right, I'll start searching for things to do. We'll make sure you and Kanyang have a great time," Su-jin replied with a smile. The two women continued talking around the real issue, as though avoiding that subject would somehow keep their lives perfectly intact. 7 years ago, the first time Su-jin met Zhao Guiying, she'd found her very different, stiff and subdued. It was the first time Su-jin accompanied Zhang Zhen to meet his parents before they got married. Zhang's father had an air of superiority from the moment she walked in, constantly ordering his wife around. Zhao Guiying, speaking little, quietly followed his commands, with a smile that seemed burdened with hidden sorrow. "Do your parents not get along? Your mom doesn't seem very happy," Su-jin had cautiously asked Zhen. They're just having a little spat." "Don't overthink it," Zhen reassured her. "It's me you're marrying, not them. As long as I treat you right, that's all that matters." With his comforting words, Su-jin happily walked hand in hand with him into marriage, confident that their love would conquer all. Then came their first New Year's visit as a married couple. That day, they caught Zhang's father in the midst of beating Zhao Guiying. "Stay out of this, woman. Who asked for your opinion in a man's business?" he spat, wielding a broom at her. Zhao Guiying, frail and hunched in a corner in her worn brown apron, looked like a rag doll, lifeless and submissive. Su-jin, unable to bear it, urged Zhen to intervene. Reluctantly, To save face in front of his new wife, Jun muttered a few words on his mother's behalf and then distracted his father with a gift of fine liquor, diffusing the situation for the time being. It was then that Soo-jin learned from Jun that his father's abuse was routine. Whether it was a meal that didn't suit his taste or a perceived challenge to his authority, his mother frequently bore the brunt of his temper. "My mom sometimes deserves it," Jun added nonchalantly. "I mean, Dad brings in the money. All she has to do is mind the house, but she can't resist meddling." The casual dismissal of his mother's suffering and the utter lack of sympathy planted a seed of fear in Soo-jin's mind. She couldn't help but wonder if one day she might find herself in the same corner, no different from Zhao Guiying, with her own life whittled down under the shadow of violence and control. Half a year after their marriage, Soo-jin became pregnant, filling the family with hopeful anticipation for the new arrival. Zhao Guiying, still as quiet as ever, handled everything dutifully. She had already prepared baby clothes and other essentials, which she asked Zhang Jun to bring home in advance. Unexpectedly, Soo-jin's father-in-law collapsed at a mahjong table and never woke up. The doctor said he had suffered a stroke, but it was too late to save him by the time he arrived at the hospital. The family, surprisingly calm, didn't seem deeply saddened. Zhang Jian handled the funeral arrangements with a stoic expression, and Zhao Guiying, her face still drawn, numbly received visitors and friends who came to pay their respects. Soo-jin stayed by Zhao Guiying's side, helping with various family matters. After the funeral, late at night, Zhang Jin finally breathed a sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He gently touched Soo-jin's belly and muttered, "Well, that old man's finally gone. Now we can live in peace." Soo-jin felt a shiver down her spine. Who would wish for their own father's death? Granted, she knew that her father-in-law was a domineering man with plenty of vices, smoking, drinking, gambling, even womanizing, running from the dinner table to the card table and then to massage parlors. His schedule was fuller than most people's workdays. But he was still family, and he had helped them financially when they couldn't afford their home, and often supported their household. Hearing Zhang Jin speak so coldly about his own father made Soo-jin question the man she had chosen. In a way, though, if there was anyone who should feel relieved, it was Zhao Guiying. After years of enduring his abuse, that oppressive presence was finally gone, and her life could begin to brighten. After Soo-jin gave birth to a son, Zhang Qinyang, Zhao Guiying moved in to help with the baby. Originally, Soo-jin's mother had promised to come and care for her during her postpartum confinement. But she canceled at the last minute. "Your sister-in-law says she needs help with the kids. You'll be fine with your mother-in-law there, right? It's only natural for grandmothers to help with their grandkids," her mother explained on the phone, sounding completely justified, oblivious to Soo-jin's disappointment and loneliness. From childhood, everything in their family had been prioritized for her older brother, something Soo-jin was well aware of. She rarely complained and held on to her parents' small acts of kindness to soothe her resentment. Yet, after giving birth, she craved her mother's presence more than ever, hoping to confide in her, to share a meal she had cooked. It felt like her last chance to be her mother's child. From then on, she would have to focus on becoming a mother herself. Zhao Guiying was the first to notice Soo-jin's low spirits, though she didn't know how to help. So she quietly urged her son to spend more time with his wife. "My mom says you're in a bad mood. What's wrong with you? You have everything you need. What's there to be unhappy about?" Zhang Juan's blunt question only made Soo-jin's resentment boil over into anger. "Even your mom could tell I'm upset, so why can't you? Ever since the baby was born, you've done nothing to help. The baby cries for milk or needs a diaper change in the middle of the night, and you sleep like a log. Is that your idea of being a father?" Zhang Jun, unwilling to placate her further, stormed out and started sleeping in the guest room the next day, treating her as though she were a plague. Zhao Guiying, hoping to ease the tension between them, offered to handle the nighttime feedings. "Xiao Su, how about this? You can pump some milk before bed, and I'll heat it up for the baby during the night. That way, you can rest a bit." She made her suggestion with genuine care, but also a hint of caution, worried that Su Jin might refuse. Su Jin hadn't had a full night's sleep since they came home from the hospital. The feeding schedule on her nightstand loomed over her like bars of a prison cell, trapping her in the small bedroom. The cries of her little angel, instead of bringing her joy, felt like a noisy curse, robbing her of any chance to rest. So, when Zhao Guiying offered her help, Su Jin, exhausted and with dark circles under her eyes, reluctantly agreed. As Su Jin and Zhao Guiying grew closer through caring for the baby together, things took an unexpected turn with Zhang Zhen. One day, after coming back from shopping, Su Jin heard his phone buzzing repeatedly on the hallway table. Worried it was a work emergency, she glanced at the screen, only to see the words, "Honey, meet me at our usual spot tonight." The affectionate message from an unknown woman was like a bucket of ice water, instantly jolting Su Jin awake. Months of confusion suddenly made sense. She had assumed that Zhang Zhuan was simply preoccupied with gaming or binge-watching videos, but instead, he had been channeling his energy into another woman. As she scrolled through their messages, she realized their affair had started during her pregnancy. Su Jin laughed bitterly. So, it's true, men really can't resist cheating. The sight of their lovey-dovey exchanges made her feel sick. When Zhang Zhuan emerged from the shower and saw her holding his phone, he snatched it away, panicked. "What are you doing? Don't you know to respect others' privacies?" Seeing the messages on the screen, he abandoned his anger and instead looked at her apologetically. "Honey, let me explain. She means nothing to me. It was just a fling." Su Jin watched as Zhang Zhuan tearfully declared his remorse, yet her heart held only revulsion and a deep sense of disappointment. Back then, against her parents' objections, she had made the difficult decision to marry him, moving thousands of miles to Yongzhou. "Go ahead and marry him if you want, but don't come crying to us when things fall apart," her parents had said, withholding her entire dowry and even refusing to attend the wedding. With little to fall back on, Su Jin had put all her hopes on Zhang Zhuan, convincing herself and everyone else that she was marrying for love. But in less than 2 years, her trust was shattered and her confidence lay in tatters. Zhao Guiying, Zhang's mother, soon found out about the situation, but she chose not to intervene directly, believing her son should give Su Jin time to come to terms with things. Meanwhile, Zhang Zhuan, having been caught, wrote a self-criticism letter and began clumsily helping with childcare and housework, putting on an act of redemption. Watching Zhang's awkward attempts at housework, Su Jin looked down at their little boy in her arms and resolved to give them another chance. She reflected on how, ever since her pregnancy, they had barely communicated, and there had been no intimacy between them for almost a year. She wondered if perhaps she was partly to blame for his straying. Reconciled, they made an agreement. As long as Zhang ended his affair, they would focus on rebuilding their family. However, Su Jin had not anticipated that while she wanted a peaceful life, the other woman had no intention of letting go so easily. It started with Zhang taking frequent phone calls in the bathroom, followed by an increase in late work nights. Su Jin quickly realized this affair was far from over. Sure enough, soon after, the other woman reached out, demanding a face-to-face meeting. "Zhuan told me there's no love left between you two. He only loves me now." Sitting across from the attractive young woman, whose face was flushed from her eagerness to proclaim their true love, Su Jin couldn't help but sneer. "Oh, he told you that? Interesting, because he never mentioned you to me. Had I known, I would have happily stepped aside for your love." The young woman, cornered, quickly lashed out, her face scrunching defensively. "He only stays with you because of your kid. If it weren't for that, we'd be married by now. Besides, I'm pregnant, so don't think you can keep us apart anymore." Listening to her bold declarations, Su Jin felt a mixture of anger and humiliation. Despite being the one truly wronged, she was somehow painted as the villain. With anger boiling over, she called Zhang and demanded a divorce. But she could not have imagined that this decision would mark the beginning of her nightmare. Zhang vehemently denied wanting to marry the other woman, claiming it was all her manipulation. "Can't you grow up a little? You make a mistake and can't even own up to it. I can't believe I married someone like you." If I had known... Oh, if you had known what? That I would leave you? Or are you talking about my ex-boyfriend? Zhang snapped, eyes blazing with jealousy and anger, as if he could devour her. What are you even saying? I broke up with him ages ago when I committed to you. Unlike you, I didn't flirt with young girls while married. Like father, like son, Su Jin retorted, her anger uncontrollable. Smack. The slap burned across her cheek, and her head rang. Divorce. I want a divorce, she screamed, desperate. Dream on, Zhang sneered, fists raining down on her. Zhao Guiying was pushing the baby stroller home from the park as the sun began to set. Inside, she was met with chaos. Broken glass littered the floor, chairs lay scattered, and the trash can had been overturned, spilling peels and wrappers across the floor like debris after an explosion. Ignoring the mess, Zhao frantically searched the apartment until she found Su Jin on the balcony, bruised and tear-streaked. Shaking, Zhao brushed Su's hair back gently, her lips trembling. Oh, dear, this wicked child, hitting you like this. Come, let me get you some ointment. I want a divorce, Su Jin replied firmly, cradling her bruised face. Zhao was at a loss for words. How could she choose between her own flesh and blood and the daughter-in-law who had suffered alongside her? She remained silent, offering quiet comfort to Su Jin, harboring the hope that maybe, one day, her son might mend his ways. The second time Zhang hit Su Jin was after she presented evidence of his infidelity, demanding he leave with nothing. This enraged him. This is my house, bought by my father. Everything you eat and use is paid for by me. When I married you, your family gave me nothing. If you want to leave, fine, but this place is mine, and my son's name is Zhang. He's mine too. His fist swung with each hateful word, belittling her as worthless. Seeing her pleas go unheard, Zhao held on to Su Jin protectively, begging her son not to make a bad situation worse. When Zhang finally grew tired of hitting her, he shoved his way past the two women, landing a final kick on Su's side before strutting off to go drinking. As Zhao held the expressionless Su Jin, she whispered words of comfort. My dear, you've suffered too much. This wretched boy, he's gone too far. Su Jin, however, brushed her off and stumbled back to her room. She appreciated Zhao's kindness, but how could she absolve the mother of a man who had turned into a monster? Days passed as Su Jin gathered evidence for a divorce case and searched for a job to support herself and her child. Finally, when she was prepared to face a long legal battle, Zhang surprised her by agreeing to divorce, on the condition that she take only custody of their son. Su Jin hesitated for just a moment before signing the papers. Freedom from this nightmare was worth more than any material possession. Seeing his scheme work, Zhang eagerly married his mistress, even before Su Jin had packed to leave with their child. With a suitcase in one hand and her baby in the other, Su Jin boarded a train back to Rongqing, her spirit crushed. She had come here 2 years ago full of hope, but now, she was leaving broken, as if everything that had once been beautiful was just a fleeting illusion, shattered by a brutal nightmare. Despite warning her family days in advance, Su Jin still instinctively lowered her head when she opened the door and met her parents' cold and resentful gazes. It reminded her of the shame she felt as a child when she made mistakes, how they'd look at her like a burden, making her feel worthless. I told you that man was no good, but you insisted on marrying him. Now look, you've been kicked out. Her father scolded her openly at the dinner table, showing no consideration for her in front of the whole family. All right. What's the point of bringing this up now? Her mother interrupted, trying to steer the conversation away. Her brother and sister-in-law sat silently, giving off a vibe that screamed, "Stay out of this." They ate their meal, visibly disengaged from the situation. A tense silence fell over the room as they ate. After dinner, her mother began preparing a makeshift bed. This house is small, you see. You and the baby will have to sleep on the balcony tonight. I've sealed up the windows and added an extra layer of newspaper. It shouldn't be too cold. Su Jin held her son, watching as her mother turned the tiny balcony into her sleeping area. She'd often read online about how a married daughter didn't truly have a home to return to. She used to think it was an exaggeration, but now she fully understood. The house was still there. It just no longer had a place for her. Her old room was now her nephew's, while the other rooms were occupied by her parents and her brother's family. Left with no choice, she settled on the balcony. After 2 nights on a camp bed, Soo-jin's back was already sore. But she kept silent, and no one seemed to notice her pain. Life at home went on as if she didn't exist, except, of course, when it was time to buy groceries, cook, do laundry, or mop the floor. In those moments, she became the first person they thought of. 2 weeks later, after washing dishes one evening, her mother pulled her into the bedroom quietly. "You've been here for 2 weeks now. You can't just keep freeloading. Tomorrow, in front of your brother and his wife, offer a red envelope with 2,000 yuan. Say it's for food expenses. You don't want your sister-in-law sulking around like she's owed millions, do you?" "But, Mom," Soo-jin protested, "I've been buying groceries, meat, and rice. I've done most of the housework. I'm not freeloading. Besides, I barely have any money left from the divorce, and I need to support my child." Her mother looked at her with disappointment, even a hint of disdain. "You ran back here with a child after getting kicked out. Who else do you have to blame? If you'd managed to get more money from that man, you wouldn't be in such a sorry state." Hearing her own mother's reproach, Soo-jin felt an overwhelming sadness. Zhang Zhuan had mistreated her, but it was even harder to accept her parents' indifference. She hadn't done anything unforgivable, other than marrying the wrong man. Why did they resent her so much? After a sleepless night, Soo-jin decided she'd had enough. Early the next morning, before anyone else was awake, she left with her son, heading back to Yongzhou. "I'll rebuild my life from the ground up. I refuse to believe my son, and I can't make it without them." But job hunting with a young child proved to be far more challenging than she'd expected. Every potential employer who noticed her baby would politely shake their head, offering her sympathetic but firm rejections. When Zhao Guiying next saw Soo-jin, she was wearing a baby carrier, tidying up bowls at a small noodle shop. "Hi, may I take your order?" Soo-jin asked, focused on clearing a table. Receiving no answer, she looked up, only to see Zhao Guiying gazing at her with a look of deep sorrow. What are you doing here?" Soo-jin looked around nervously, as if checking for someone else nearby. "Don't worry, Sue," Zhao Guiying reassured her. "I'm here with some ladies from the community for a performance. I didn't know you were here. Zhen doesn't know either. And I swear, I won't tell him I saw you." Zhao Guiying waited for Soo-jin to finish her shift, then followed her home, keeping a respectful distance. In the end, Soo-jin allowed her inside her tiny rented room. Looking around the cramped space, Zhao Guiying seemed to make up her mind. "Sue, give me a couple of days. I'll find you and the child a decent place. I promise you, I won't let that son of mine bother you. I just feel so guilty for how my family treated you. Please, let me do something to help." Soo-jin thought it was just talk, but 2 days later, Zhao Guiying came through. She arranged a 2-bedroom apartment with full furnishings, and the complex even had a daycare. "Sue, I've thought it over. You're young, and you should be focusing on building a career. Let me take care of Sunyang. You just concentrate on finding a good job. The 3 of us can stick together and make this work." "Did he agree to this?" Soo-jin asked, wary and confused. After all, it was unusual for someone to choose living with an ex-daughter-in-law over their own son. Reading her expression, Zhao Guiying sighed. "He's hopeless. Do you know why he agreed so quickly to the divorce? It's because his new wife's family is about to receive a big payout from a redevelopment project. They'll get a few apartments in compensation, and he wanted to make sure he'd benefit from it. That's why he rushed to divorce you." Soo-jin had known her ex was callous, but not to this extent. He hadn't needed a place to live, yet had forced her to give up her share, leaving her and their child homeless. Zhao Guiying continued, her face filled with regret. "I've had a terrible life, Sue. My parents favored my brother and married me off to Zhuan's father, so they could afford his wedding. And though my husband was wealthy, he was also violent, always quick to raise his hand. Now my son's grown up and only cares about money and gambling. There's no way I can rely on him. I've suffered long enough, she went on. I just want to live peacefully for whatever time I have left. Let me help with the child, and you can be my family for the rest of my days. We'll support each other. What do you say? After arriving in Chengdu, Su-jin settled Zhao Guiying and Kenyang comfortably and took them around some famous tourist spots for 2 days. Then, without delay, she headed to her new company to arrange for the upcoming work. Mom, I need to go to the company and get things done. Once I'm finished with this busy period, I'll take you both out for more fun, okay? What's wrong with that? You go ahead and work. We'll explore the area nearby first. Who knows? We might find some great places to eat and have fun before you do, right, Kenyang? Yeah. Grandma is amazing. Kenyang's soft voice made both women laugh. From then on, Su-jin was busy setting up the company, searching for a store location and recruiting employees, returning home exhausted every night, often close to midnight. Zhao Guiying insisted on waiting for Su-jin to return before going to sleep. Ever since they started living together, it seemed to have become a habit for them. Su-jin remembered when she first started as a clerk at her current company, her mother would wait for her every night, cooking noodles or wontons, and only after watching her eat voraciously would she feel at ease enough to go to sleep. Zhao Guiying wasn't very talkative, but a bowl of noodles, were enough to warm Su-jin's heart through the lost moments of her life. On a Friday night, after going over the final procedures with her employees, Su-jin returned home at 10. As usual, Zhao Guiying had cooked noodles for her, but didn't rush to bed. Is something up? Zhao Guiying seemed a bit shy for the first time. Little Su, it's been a while since we arrived. Do you want to go home and visit? After all, we're so close now. Su-jin paused mid-bite, and after a long moment, she finally murmured, "Let me think about it." Zhao Guiying went to bed, and Su-jin gazed at the pile of special products from Yongzhou on the floor, lost in thought. It had been 5 years since she left home, cutting off all contact in a fit of anger. She had stubbornly thought, if you don't care about me at all, then consider me dead. Although she had been resolute in her bitterness, late at night, deep down, she still longed for parents who cared for her and a brother who would look after her. Perhaps family had that peculiar magic. Even if it had once caused you pain, there was still a twinge of unwillingness, a hope to be reunited. On a Saturday morning, Su-jin decided to take Kenyang to visit her parents and brother and sister-in-law. Years had passed, and her parents visibly aged. When they saw the mother and son standing at the door with their bags, they joyfully welcomed them inside. Her mom and sister-in-law were excitedly feeling the new clothes and branded bags Su-jin had bought, while her dad held a box of wine, nodding appreciatively. "This wine is expensive. I remember it cost 700 or 800 a bottle." As mealtime approached, Su-jin instinctively wanted to help in the kitchen, but her mother stopped her, saying, "You haven't been home in so long. How can I let you work? Today, I'm making you a few of my special dishes." Surprised, Su-jin sat on the sofa, watching everyone joyfully chatting away, and suddenly felt a warmth wash over her. That night after returning home, Su-jin was in high spirits and chattered with Zhao Guiying about how wonderful her family had been to her. Zhao Guiying smiled at her. "That's great. As long as you're happy, a harmonious family is what matters most. Mom, let's go out next weekend. We'll eat near my place. I'll book a table for dinner so you can enjoy a good time with us." Zhao Guiying nodded while heading to her bedroom. "Sure, I'll follow your lead." That night, for the first time, Su-jin had a beautiful dream and even laughed in her sleep. Dinner on the weekend was booked at a unique hot pot restaurant surrounded by lush trees and flowing streams, illuminated by beautiful lights. Sitting down to eat hot pot while enjoying the night view was quite an experience. Before leaving, Zhao Guiying thought it over and politely declined Su-jin's invitation. "You all finally gathered together. I won't crash the party. Besides, my presence doesn't feel appropriate. You and Kenyang should enjoy yourselves, and I'll wait for you at home." Unable to convince her otherwise, Su-jin took her son along. The atmosphere at the dinner was warm, with everyone chatting excitedly about daily life until her brother mentioned buying a school district house for his son. Su Jin suddenly realized that the ball had been passed to her. Xiao Jin, now that you're a big boss, you can't ignore your nephew. We're all counting on him to bring glory to the family. After a few drinks, her dad directly bypassed the formalities and got to the point. Her mom chimed in. It's so hard for kids to go to school these days. If we don't buy a house in the school district, they won't get into good schools. We're all family. You can help your brother now that you're capable. Her brother and sister-in-law also pulled out their past connections, urging Su Jin to agree quickly. Looking at her family smiling widely, Su Jin's chewing slowed down as her heart felt like a big ice cube had been dropped into her hot pot soup, cooling everything down. Realizing that the reason for their warm treatment was that they were eyeing her money, she suddenly understood. It's said that the road for a married daughter returning home is paved with money, and it seemed that wasn't far from the truth. If she were still broke, would they have treated her this warmly? Thinking this way, Su Jin agreed to consider it, but had already made up her mind to keep her distance from this family in the future. What kind of familial love and brotherly affection? Perhaps she cared, but it was also apparent that they regarded her as a pawn. If they found her useful, they would pick her up quickly, but if not, they would cast her aside. A family like that was better off without her. When Su Jin returned home with her sleeping son, Zhao Guiying was chatting with her old friends through a video call. Worried about waking the child, Zhao Guiying hurriedly said goodbye to her friends, helped Su Jin put Kenyang in bed, and tucked him in. How was dinner with your family? Did Kenyang enjoy it too? Su Jin brushed her fingers over Kenyang's chubby face, her gaze drifting for a moment. It was okay. It's getting late. You should sleep early. I still have to work for a bit, she said, heading straight to the living room. Zhao Guiying was momentarily taken aback, but didn't dare to ask more. After washing up, she went to bed. As the new store opened, Su Jin threw herself into work without pause. Zhao Guiying took Kenyang to kindergarten every day, spending the rest of her time shopping for groceries and walking in the park with the elderly women in the neighborhood. Before long, she had made a new circle of friends. When her parents brought up the topic of buying a school district house again, Su Jin refused without hesitation. Although I've saved a bit of money over the years, I'm not rich enough to buy a school district house. Besides, I have a son to raise, so you should let my brother and sister-in-law figure it out themselves. Her parents, dissatisfied, didn't stop at just calling her. They even came to her workplace, trying to expose her unfilial behavior in front of her colleagues. When Su Jin went to work, she happened to run into her parents and had the security guard keep them outside, just barely avoiding a scene. If you still want me to support you every month and care for you when you're on a hospital bed, stop making a scene. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that you won't lose a strong support for your old age, Su Jin stated plainly over the phone. Realizing that they couldn't squeeze any benefits from Su Jin, her parents finally quieted down for a while. During holidays, Su Jin still sent her parents red envelopes and gifts, but the excitement from before was long gone. Whenever she saw Zhao Guiying walking towards her with Kenyang, smiling, Su Jin couldn't help but think that sometimes her own flesh and blood didn't care for her as much as Zhao Guiying did. Zhao Guiying always said that having a daughter like Su Jin was her fortune. But Su Jin wanted to say that in her toughest times when she needed someone to lean on, Zhao Guiying's presence was a light in her life. The two of them were like two lonely souls walking on a dark road, drawn together by a glimmer of light, warming each other in their embrace and rescuing one another, becoming better versions of themselves. Thinking this way, Su Jin even felt that meeting Zhang Jun in this lifetime wasn't entirely a bad thing. Seasons passed, and as time flowed on, when Zhang Kenyang entered junior high, Zhao Guiying quietly moved out while Su Jin was on a business trip. When Su Jin returned home, she found no one there, only a note left on the nightstand. Dear daughter, don't worry, I'm fine. Just come visit me when you can. At the end was an address. Following the address, Su Jin discovered it led to a nursing home in the city. Zhao Guiying had reserved a room there 3 months prior. With the guidance of a caregiver, Su Jin finally spotted Zhao Guiying. She was chatting and basking in the sun with a group of elderly ladies, and when she saw Su Jin, she immediately stood up and exclaimed, Oh, my daughter is here. Let's chat later. Soo-jin's eyes turned red as she angrily reproached, Mom, why did you leave without saying a word? Do you still consider me your daughter? Didn't we agree that I would take care of you? Zhao Guiying hurried over to comfort her. How could I not treat you like my daughter? I'm really doing well here. You see, Kenyang has grown up. He's at school now and doesn't need me at home. I have company here, and that's pretty good, isn't it? Soo-jin spent the whole afternoon trying to convince Zhao Guiying to come home, but she couldn't persuade her. In the end, she had to agree to let her stay and promise to visit her with Kenyang every weekend. Soo-jin wanted to upgrade the service package to make Zhao Guiying more comfortable, but Zhao Guiying stopped her. No need. What I have now is just fine. After saying this, she took out a savings book from the drawer and handed it to Soo-jin. Listen, Mom has money. A few years ago, when I went back to Yeongjo for a gathering with my old friends, I sold the old house. I saved 200,000 for Kenyang. He can use it for school or marriage in the future. The other 100,000 is for my own care. I only said you should take care of me to ease your worries. I won't really burden you. Soo-jin held Zhao Guiying's hand, crying uncontrollably. I'm sorry, Mom. I've been so busy with work these years, accepting everything you've done for us without a second thought. I thought I'd have plenty of time to repay you later, but hearing you say this makes me feel like... Zhao Guiying tucked a loose strand of hair behind Soo-jin's ear, smiling as she said, Not at all. Who says you haven't done well? You don't know how happy I've been these years, having my grandson by my side and gaining such a wonderful daughter. Others envy me. Really? Can I still lie to you, my dear? The two of them shared a knowing smile, and all the past turned into cherished moments in their laughter, transforming into hopes for a longer and better future together. Zhao Guiying passed away one autumn afternoon during her usual nap. She simply never woke up. Respecting her wishes, Soo-jin didn't send her ashes back to their hometown. Instead, she drove thousands of miles to bring her back to the sea. Little Sue, I don't want to go back to our hometown after I die. There's no place for me in my family, and I don't want to be buried with that man who used to hit me. If that happens, I won't have peace in my next life. So, please scatter my ashes in the sea. That way I'll be free. As Soo-jin watched the ashes drift away in the wind, she couldn't help but whisper, Mom, safe travels. In our next life, let's still be mother and daughter.